Hey everyone. In a world where people, when we talk about movies, what's one thing that we usually don't bring up when we want to make a list or analyzing of films? What's usually one thing that not many people really decide to have involved with rating something? The studios. Now, granted, I'm not saying that shouldn't be true. I agree. Yeah, we don't really need to be putting a studio's responsibility for how we think of a movie. So, like, say for example, if there's a movie with good quality, I give it a lower score because the studio who made it did some bad things in the office. You saw my video of me talking about how we shouldn't really be judging movies based off of the things that happen not in the movie. Anyway, well, even though studios don't really have anything to do with how we rate something, they do kind of control what movies they have ownership of. They're kind of like the holders of the movies. So, like, a certain movie needs to have a home or somewhere to be. And that's kind of where the studios fall in. So I decided, for the hell of it, I'm going to be doing some top 10 lists of the big major studios and just kind of the movies that they either have made or at least keep and hold in ownership. So for this video, we're going to be looking at Universal Pictures. They have a big stock of movies. Their variety includes a lot. You got stuff from Steven Spielberg. You got some of the big franchises that are cool. You got DreamWorks now. Yeah, crazy. All the DreamWorks movies are Universal. They definitely do have a lot to put into their stock. For this list, I'm going to be talking about my favorite movies that were made by Universal, or at least in other cases, are movies that Universal currently owns. That's kind of what it is. And I'll be doing this for a while with each other big studio because I just kind of want to talk more into different ways about these movies. So for this list, I'm going to be talking about sort of how they fall under the category, sort of what Universal made them to, kind of where their studio falls in, and how they work as a good movie. Try to bring up some things I haven't talked about earlier. That's kind of my big goal with this list, to try and bring up some things about the movie I like to talk about that I haven't talked about earlier. I'll try to do that for this time, so let's do this. So I've spent a while doing top 10 lists without including sequels. I've mostly been doing lists that only include one of a different series of films. I decided to kind of go ahead and kind of skip over doing that because I feel like I don't really need to be giving sequels or other films less attention for that reason. So I'm going to be including the sequels for every list I make from now on. So here we have Back to the Future, Part 2. It's interesting to know because not many people like to think about this, but Back to the Future Part 2 is a kind of out of nowhere sequel. The first movie did end on a little cliffhanger of them going to the DeLorean and flying away, but that wasn't really meant to follow up to anything. We weren't supposed to see a second film. We were just supposed to see it end as them going on another fun adventure, doing the same thing over and over. Well, in a retro regard, it was still smart to see what they did. So, even though a sequel wasn't originally the idea, we got one anyway. About 4 years later, a second Back to the Future movie came out, and this one focused on sort of a new adventure. This adventure being them going to the future, that being the year 2015, and naturally, because it was the 80s, a lot of the things they predicted we would have by that year, we didn't have. Flying cars, no. Actual hoverboards, no. All that, a lot of stuff that this movie showed we didn't get. That said, there are actually some things they did kind of predict that we did get. They predicted online video chatting, we do that. They predicted touchscreen incorporation, we do that. They predicted the Chicago Cubs would win the World Series. They did. It was actually a year later, but they still did, so yeah, this movie did predict some good things right. And even if it didn't predict everything right, that's not really the big problem. That's not something that this movie should be criticized for. Because, like, come on, how are they supposed to know what we got? Like, you think Robert Zemeckis is a time traveler? No. The movie does take a lot of different new angles. Instead of it just being them in the future, it actually does give them other adventures to go on, like them having to return back to 1955, along with kind of following up to what we could expect next. Like this time around, knowing there's going to be another one. We got to have 3 movies in this trilogy. Please do not make a fourth one. I think by now it's known that a fourth one just seems totally inevitable, but I just hope for the love of God that never becomes a thing. There's a lot of movies that don't need more sequels, but they got them. But this just really doesn't. So here we have Steven Spielberg's most iconic film, supposedly. It's E.T. What makes E.T. so iconic is the moon and the bike. That's pretty much become the logo for Steven Spielberg. The moon bike, flying bike in front of moon, whatever term there is to call it. E.T. does a lot of things right, and it really does show. My initial thoughts for the movie were it's a pretty great film, but does it really fall that high as that amazing of a movie? But as I look more into it, there's a lot that this movie does that not many other movies have tried for. Kind of showing off a more hidden, more mysterious vibe to an alien. Most movies, when they show aliens, they try to get as many details with them as possible. They try to analyze the aliens so much to the point where we know 100% about who they are and what their purpose is. But this movie kind of just shows one alien who we don't get entire info about. We just know is an alien from a different planet who's trying to get home. And that's just what they go for. They don't try to explain so much about what his history is, kind of more towards. They don't really say much about what exactly is home. That's kind of for us to see. They just kind of show him as a mysterious creature because, that's what aliens are, really. They're mysterious creatures. They're not something that needs to be analyzed an entire movie when all they want to do is just go home. So that's what E.T. really does succeed with. It also succeeds pretty well with some of the visual styles it has. One thing I do want to bring up is when this movie was released in 2002 for the 20th anniversary, they wanted to give it the Star Wars treatment in that they wanted to make it a special edition. And unfortunately, that backfired big time because there are so many changes this movie did that nobody enjoyed. The biggest change is that most of E.T.'s scenes have him replaced with a CGI creature. Yeah, I'm not kidding. The whole purpose of the visual style being a very cool, stunning puppet just got replaced with CGI E.T. Like, seriously, so many of E.T.'s iconic moments are now him in CGI. There's also, of course, the infamous change of the guns being replaced with walkie-talkies. That seems to be the big thing people complain about with this special edition change. They like to call the change the E.T., the walkie-talkie edition. That's what the special edition should just be called, the walkie-talkie edition. And what's great about it is that in 2012, for the 30th anniversary, the next release of E.T. removed that special edition from being the main purpose. So now, just about every main screening of E.T. will be the original version, the version that should exist. It kind of sucks that Star Wars never did that. Like, we don't, from this day to this day forward, there have been no re-releases that include the original despecialized films. The only Star Wars we can ever see now is the special edition ones. So I really wish someday we can finally get to see how they originally were and not have to be stuck so much with the version that changed so much. But still, it is what it is, I guess. I'm just glad that E.T. fixed that mistake because, yeah, the special edition was just a big mistake. But the E.T. we have now is a Steven Spielberg classic that certainly should be loved by many people who need to view it. Here's, of course, one of the more recent movies to come out of Universal's slot. This was a big change for Nolan. Director Christopher Nolan, who is definitely still one of the greatest directors of all time, has had a history with Warner Brothers. A lot of the movies he made, if not pretty much every film he made, was with them. Like, ever since he started them, he helped make such big movies for the studio. He made, of course, the Batman movies, there's Inception, there's Dunkirk. There's a whole lot of films that Christopher Nolan has made with Warner Brothers. But then around 2023, he decided to quit with the studio and go work with some other big studios. So then Universal took his hand and he decided to give him this big movie to work on. And yes, it played off pretty well because we got Oppenheimer, a movie that's honestly so damn good. The movie really does perfect in kind of showing visual insights of the history behind the man who created the big bomb and kind of showing his big history kind of surrounding, how important his life is and sort of how much of a purpose he feels he has. Kind of just showing really a lot of interesting, important things about him while still using that Christopher Nolan style. This is something I love. I just love seeing a true story be told with such unique, fun visual things, giving something that's serious a more bigger attention grabbing look, like kind of making it so that more viewers can pay more attention to it and not kind of get bored thinking, oh, so I want explosions. I'm not saying this movie replaced all the serious stuff with explosions. No, no. But it did give a nice distinct style to the story that made the whole 3 hours this movie had not feel as long. The movie managed to not feel as long as it was because it had Christopher Nolan's hand in it. He just knows how to make a movie watchable. And yes, this movie is lots of fun. So I sure do hope Christopher Nolan takes advantage of trying out new studios and not going with all the budget that Warner Bros. Gives them, because even though that budget provided some great movies, someday that could backfire. So, gotta make sure Christopher Nolan's an individual who knows what he's making. One thing I want to bring up is that Universal made this movie, which feels like Warner Brothers could have made it because it's Christopher Nolan, while Warner Brothers made Barbie, which Universal could have made because they actually have ownership to all the animated Barbie films. So it's kind of a mix and match thing. It's probably one of the few things that makes Barbenheimer such a big thing, but regardless, let's continue on. So this is another film that I had to look back at and see how much better it looks at newer viewings. My initial thoughts for it was it's just another teen flick, I guess. I can give it a pass for being a fun 80s teen flick. But at this point forward, as I look at it, I see something that's honestly way more fun than initially. The movie is great in so many ways. I think what I love about this movie the most is how much of a good reflection it has on teen life. While most of my love for this movie at first viewing was showing the 80s vibe that teen high schools have, looking back, what this movie does greatly is depict what being in high school has. It depicts sort of the things that come of it and showing off different people and doing a different thing, showing kind of where their lives are, showing a life of being someone who's always about getting girls or boys, someone who's always dedicated to having a good job, those who don't care about the rules and just enjoy being a fun, slacking teen like Sean Penn in this movie. This movie just depicts different sides of the teen life, and that's honestly what makes it such a great movie to me. I think this movie is so much better than I would have initially thought. I just see this as probably one of the best teen films ever, and it's just so much fun to watch, okay? And it's funny, this isn't even made by some big teen expert, like John Hughes didn't make it. No, it was just made by Universal, and forgot the director's name, but I don't care, the movie's so much fun. So, even if I don't quite know the director's name in my head, the movie is still just so much fun to watch. And I think I give this movie as many rewatches as I feel like it. Alright, now let's talk about another teen flick that was made by John Hughes. The Breakfast Club has pretty much become a staple as one of the greatest teen films of all time. And for good reasons. What this movie does is show teens in detention. The whole movie is just of these 5 teens who are stuck in detention, and essentially the whole time they share connections, they say things to each other, they do different things. It's not just you're just sitting down watching them just get bored. You're actually seeing what they can do in detention and actually showing kind of how much more they feel to each other in this. Like, initial viewing, I first thought, okay, it has drama, it's teens in detention, that's cool. But honestly, this movie is just so amazing at accomplishing its stunt. There's no wonder that so many people consider this the greatest teen film out there, because no other movie can depict teens in attention this well. I think this movie needs more attention, honestly. I feel like even with all the attention it has, it's still not enough. There needs to be more attention put into this movie. It's just a bunch of teens in attention, but yet it's played out so well that there's just so much love about it. So yeah, I gotta give this movie. This movie needs more viewership, because man, it's just such an iconic film. It's one of the most iconic '80s movies, I feel it should be. It's definitely the best thing John Hughes has made. It's just, such a great film. I must say, you definitely deserve to check it out if you haven't. I would hate to see someone who doesn't think this movie is anything great because I haven't seen it, honestly. I just think, if don't say anything about it until you watch it. Now, I have a huge fatigue for baseball. I think you all know that by now. I've mentioned it a few times. So, naturally, a great baseball movie is in my field. My field of dreams. I need friends. Field of Dreams is honestly probably the best baseball film I've ever imagined. Why is Field of Dreams so great? What makes it better than all the other baseball movies? Well, that's kind of a hard thing to answer, because in terms of the actual sport, there's a lot of different things that each baseball movie does. So, honestly, this movie, there really isn't anything about this movie in terms of how the game is played that would make it stand out. What does make it stand out is how the whole story is told. For something as stupid as a guy who wants to make a baseball field, there's a lot thrown into it. And I think what makes this movie work so amazingly to me is how it's able to take such a simple, not well paid attention to idea and putting so much to it. It's something so plain and kind of basic, not really something you would get your eyes' attention towards, and actually making it something that actually does seem attention worthy. So something as simple as wanting to make a baseball field becomes such a big deal for a movie. I like those movies that make something so plain and simple actually much more meaningful and serious than you would initially think. So honestly, now I want to build a baseball field because I can have old baseball players talk to me, and I can't do that. But I can definitely still enjoy watching this film, honestly, because I think Kevin Costner is probably at his best in this movie. He's a pretty great actor, and this movie is probably one of his best works. If you're a fan of baseball, you've obviously already seen this movie. But, you probably have different feelings about it. There may be some people who see this as just a great baseball film. Well, I personally see it as the best film to ever have baseball thrown to it, ever. I just think this movie captures the spirit of baseball and the spirit of a good little story to a pretty great S. It just does it all so well. Alright, so yeah, Schindler's List. I've talked a lot about this movie before when I first reviewed it, since I have just seen it this year, so there really isn't much else I can say about it. All I know is that Steven Spielberg directed it, so obviously Universal would have a hand in it, and that he made this movie in the best way ever. This was the movie that won him the Oscar for Best Director. He's made so many great movies before, but this was the film that got him the Oscar for Best Director. It was well deserved because, yeah, this movie's got it all. It's got drama, it's got well-paced characters, a good plot. It's honestly just something that's so attention-grabbing. You will pay attention to this movie once you turn it on. Once you watch it, you're not going to want to look away from it. You'll actually get sucked into what you're watching. Okay? You will not forget what this movie taught you. And that's what probably makes it a definitive biopic. Out of all the biopics I've seen, there are some out there that I will admit I don't remember very well, but this is one that I remember perfectly, just for telling everything it did in such a great and flawless way, okay? Again, there's nothing else I could say about it. I've already said enough about why this movie is so amazing, so yeah. Please check it out, okay? You're gonna get grabbed to it once you turn it on. Of course, here is one of the first things Steven Spielberg got famous for. Jaws. It's Jaws. I mean, come on. This is Universal really putting a big blockbuster name, isn't it? This was, of course, known as the biggest summer blockbuster at the time because, not many people would expect a movie to be so huge during the summertime where the whole gimmick is to make you afraid to go in the water. That's why Jaws is such a big success because, yeah, you get scared to go in the water. Even if you would argue it's old and maybe not as work well to that advantage now, I personally think it still works fine. Okay, I mean, I feel like there could be people out there who say this movie isn't as scary or as frighteningly to that advantage anymore because it's old. I say no, no. This movie still works at what it does because yeah, I still think watching this movie will make it pretty intense to go in the water, or at least in the beach. It's more at least going to the beach, per se. Going in any water like the pool, I will admit that kind of isn't what this movie does well, but it does great at giving you that fear of the beach, or just giving you lots of great suspense from time to time what the movie does. And I think Universal and Steven Spielberg both should be thanked for it because they're what made this movie a huge blockbuster, I feel like. And I think every person who's seen this movie knows how much of an impact it had. And I'm sure every person who's seen it just agrees how great of a movie it is. Of course, we have yet another film from Steven Spielberg. Yeah, remember I said Universal and Spielberg have a connection? Steven Spielberg has directed a lot of movies that Universal made. Then here's Jurassic Park, the billion-dollar film of Spielberg's lineup. Happened to also come out the exact same year as Schindler's List. So Spielberg had two amazing films in 1 year. That's honestly enough to know how great of a director he is. Jurassic Park is another film that I honestly can't say too much about I haven't already said before. It's so much attention to it. The CGI for the dinosaurs aged perfectly. The story has such a great mindset to it. There's so much great suspense, a lot of great characters, and I honestly just think this movie is worth rewatching 24/7. I honestly just think that this movie has so much to it that makes it great for me. And I mean, I'm not going to look back at this movie and think it's got some plot issues because honestly, I just can't find any big plot issues that ruin it for me. I mean, there's no movie that doesn't have a plot issue. Okay, every movie's got a plot issue, but I just, as long as what I'm seeing has my attention and doesn't leave me totally lost, but I don't care. I'll still love it. And that's what Jurassic Park does, It gives me so much great stuff to focus on that I won't get bothered too much by what big issues the plot may have. Because I still love what it did right. And what it did right is what can be focused on for a story that knows how to tell itself. I'll give credit where credit's due. Back to the Future honestly holds up pretty amazingly. Honestly, I think maybe just because the movie, watching it again, I can pay attention to all of it. And the movie that honestly keeps me grabbed is Putting My Attention Big. And it's a movie that I can watch and remember everything towards. Is what makes a great movie for this. So yeah, this is still my favorite movie from Universal Pictures. And I know what you're saying. Oh, okay, you should not, this is really a necessary comparison. It's not, no. But even though Universal Pictures doesn't really need to be the big attention reason for watching a movie, it does still deserve to be acknowledged as a studio that makes films. So, even though there's no real reason to watch movies because of what studio made it, it still is fine to acknowledge them because, they are the ones who hold on to the movies. They're the ones who will promote the films. They're the ones who will have the films re-released. So every time you see a movie get promoted, re-released, or given a special cool upgrade in some way, you can thank the studio for. Anything that happens to a movie, whether it's when it's released, how it's marketed, or what changes are made to it, that's where the studio should be thanked for, whether in a good way or a bad way. So yeah, because of this movie's great re-releases, some of the great little add-ons this film had, and just how amazingly the film still holds up with barely any special edition changes at all. That I can thank Universal for. If you don't like this idea, too bad, because I already planned out I'm going to be doing the same idea for a top 10 list for the other big studios. So, yeah, expect to see those, and I'll be expecting not many views because it's one of the many things on my channel that you people don't really care much about.